As some of you know, I teach theology and train men who are studying for the priesthood at Catholic University. Last Monday, we had our opening faculty meeting. And about 2 minutes into the agenda, without really saying so, we all knew that we needed to put that agenda aside and just begin to share how we were feeling and what we were thinking about the sex abuse crisis and the cover-up. And so we spent most of the morning listening to each other, sharing thoughts and reactions and feelings. And I must say it was a very healing process for us. And all week I've been listening to people speak about the reaction. I've been reading about it on social media. At the same time, I've been praying about God's response to these events and just what God is doing about this tragedy. Well, this morning I'd like to know how you've been reacting. And so this is going to take some participation. So a yes to the following statements if this has been your experience. So have you found yourself feeling sorrow for the children and for the lives ruined and the families damaged by this crisis? Yes. I'd really be freaked out if you didn't say yes to that one. Have you been feeling rage and anger at the crimes committed and the cover-up and the betrayal of the gospel by our leaders? Yes. And believe me, that's holy and righteous rage and anger. How about this one? Have you felt some frustration because there seems to be no system, no structure by which the people of God can influence change? Have you felt some of that frustration? Yes. Here's a tough one. Have you thought of leaving the church? Yes, no, and I'm sure you know people who have. This may be a strange one, but I think it's important to ask. Does anyone feel some hope that perhaps real change and good will come out from this dark moment in our church? At the 7:30 this morning, I heard yes, some maybes, and some no's. These are all legitimate reactions. I want you to realize that our sorrow, our disgust, our rage and frustration, these all come about because we know Jesus. We know the way of life that He calls us to live and how we have seen an absolute failure with regard to that. We know that shepherds should care for lambs and not devour them. We know that the church is meant to be the light of the world and not some dark hole that devours lives. And what about God? How's God been responding? Now, it is no easy thing to discern God's will. Let me make a suggestion or two. I think today we are witnessing the dark cloud of God's judgment coming over the church. And the way we know that is because you, the people of God, are giving voice to God's judgment over the shepherds. So listen Listen to the thundering judgment of God. I am the Lord your God. Sexual abuse is a sin and a crime. It has no place in my church and in the world. The abuse of power and position is a sin. It has no place in my church. The Lord our God says, I will not tolerate a culture that puts institution and leaders and its reputation above the vulnerable and the weak. Woe to my shepherds and priests who have failed to listen to the victims. Shut up and start listening and learning from the weak and the vulnerable, from laity, from women and men, black and white. Remember, there is no place in my church for clericalism. None. Wake up and serve my holy people. I'm starting to wonder if, as part of our penance, bishops and priests and deacons should forego those titles for a little while, until our leaders realize that those are not titles of honor and respect, they are designations of service. And until we realize those are designations of service and not titles of honor, maybe we should just say, hi David, not Father David. Hi Don, not Bishop Donald. That'd be a good penance to start. Now my hope is that the dark cloud of God's judgment that has come over the church will in fact awaken the entire world to the abuse and violence that is inflicted on children and women and workers and the imprisoned. What's happening in the church is actually part of a much larger worldwide problem. Do you know that according to government statistics, 84% of children are abused, not in church, but in their homes. In their homes. It's not by celibates, it's by grandfathers and fathers and uncles. Remember, Harvey Weinstein was not celibate. Larry Nassar was not celibate. This is a much bigger problem. And my hope is, as the Spirit shines a light on the church, that this light will shine on all instances of abuse and neglect. I'm convinced that the Spirit that's at work in the church now, that says no more to this, is the same Spirit that's given rise to the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter movement. Because the Spirit of God today is demanding that all people be treated with dignity and respect. Now there's something else I think that God is doing. In the midst of this dark cloud, if you look carefully, I think you can start to see a new day dawning. I think you can start to see clouds breaking up, a blue sky just appearing, and some light coming into the church. I think a new day is dawning in the church, and it's all about reform. Our God is calling the entire church to real, lasting, cultural, and institutional reform. God is calling the church to begin to embody the gospel in its structures, in its institutions, in its leadership. Now, much can be said about where and how the church needs reform. Let me just close with a few thoughts. Certainly, we need a church culture that promotes humble leaders who will listen to the laity, especially to the most vulnerable. We need pastoral councils and parish councils filled with laity that are structured by canon law so that they have real teeth and can affect real change in the church. And above all reform has to turn the church back to Christ and his way of life. It is only in Jesus that we can have faith. Faith in nothing else but in the risen Lord. Now, if God can raise a dead man to life, I think God can raise this church back to life. So my friends, let's remember the Road to Emmaus story. When the Lord walked with those people after he died, today he's walking with those victims, with those families, with all damaged by this crisis. And it's his Spirit that's inspired them to speak. It's his Spirit that is demanding change. And as we walk through the pain and damage that's been done, please know that the Lord walks with you. But he doesn't just walk with you. He's standing out ahead of us with his heart and arms wide open, inviting us to come into him and the new life he offers us and the new way of being church he wants to create with us. So today, let us go out to meet him and become the kind of church that our world needs us to be. Amen.